On the morning of July 13th, 2011, the sun had barely risen over Coronado, California, when the calm of the quiet neighborhood was shattered. A woman was found dead inside the mansion of her boyfriend, Jonah Shacknai. It was an upscale, sprawling estate, nestled near the ocean, but what happened behind those lavish walls was anything but serene. Rebecca Zahau, 32, was discovered hanging from a balcony. Her body was bound, her feet tied, and a strange arrangement of ropes left her dangling in an unnatural, almost ritualistic pose. The circumstances were bizarre, to say the least. A note was found near her, scrawled in block letters. "She saved him. Can you save her?" The cryptic message, the method of her death, and the position her body was found in raised more questions than answers. Initially, the police ruled it a suicide, but everything about Rebecca's death screamed foul play. Was it possible that someone could take their own life in such a grotesque manner? The details didn't add up, and her family, particularly her sister, was convinced that Rebecca was murdered. What was the truth behind her death? And if it was murder, who would have the motive to kill her? The investigation began immediately, with Detective Michael G. Johnson leading the charge. But even he knew that this case was going to be far from straightforward. As he entered the mansion, his eyes scanned the darkened room, filled with the smell of old wood and sea salt. The house, which once seemed like a symbol of success, now felt like a tomb. Every corner of the estate held whispers, and every room seemed to hide secrets that only Rebecca could have known. Inside the room, the scene was chilling. Rebecca's body swayed gently in the breeze, as if mocking the very idea that this was a self-inflicted act. No one could understand why someone in her position, beautiful, intelligent, and successful, would choose such a violent, theatrical way to end their life. Her boyfriend, Jonah Shacknai, was not at the mansion that morning, but he had left just hours before. His presence in the case, along with his history of troubled relationships, raised suspicions. It wasn't just the scene that raised alarms, it was the people who surrounded Rebecca. Jonah's ex-wife, Dina Shacknai, had an eerie connection to the case. A few days earlier, Dina's son, Max, had tragically fallen from the second-story balcony. He was in a coma, and his injuries were severe, but he was still alive. Was Rebecca's death linked to the boy's fall? Did someone want revenge for the accident? The mysterious connection between the two events would turn out to be one of the most significant clues in the case. Detective Johnson was determined to get to the truth, but what he uncovered only added layers of confusion. Jonah, who had been at the hospital with Max, was also strangely calm about the death of his girlfriend. In interviews, he expressed shock, but his demeanor seemed off. Then there was the family's reaction. Rebecca's sister, Mary Zahau, publicly stated that Rebecca had been deeply unhappy, but the family had no idea that something so horrific could happen. Was Jonah hiding something? Was someone else involved? As the police dug deeper into Rebecca's life, they learned that she had recently suffered from emotional turmoil. Her relationship with Jonah was far from perfect, and she had been increasingly isolated. She had no close friends in the area, and her family had only spoken to her occasionally. She seemed to be struggling with something, but what was it? Detective Johnson's instincts told him there was more to this than met the eye. As the case progressed, the authorities uncovered more evidence that didn't add up. For one, the timing of her death was strange. It was as if someone knew exactly when to strike. But the most shocking discovery came when the investigators reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby camera. The footage showed Jonah's brother, Adam Shacknai, arriving at the mansion hours after Rebecca's body was found. He seemed nervous, glancing around as if checking for witnesses. His actions would soon become a focal point in the investigation. The case began to take a darker turn when another detail emerged. Rebecca's body had been found in a position that suggested someone had been trying to send a message. But what was that message, and who was the intended target? Detective Johnson stood at the crime scene, staring at the haunting figure of Rebecca's body. He had seen his fair share of grisly deaths, but something about this one gnawed at him. It felt wrong. It wasn't just the strange position of the body, or the cryptic note that left him unsettled. It was the sense of impending danger. Who would do something so calculated and cold-hearted? Was someone trying to cover their tracks, or was this a meticulously planned act of revenge? The investigation was just beginning, and with each passing day the questions mounted. But one thing was certain: the truth behind Rebecca Zahau's death was far from clear. As Detective Johnson prepared to dive deeper into the lives of those involved, he had no idea how twisted and complex this case would become. But when they opened the locked basement door, what they found changed everything. The investigation into Rebecca Zahau's death had barely begun when a chilling discovery sent it spiraling into new, darker territory. Detective Michael G. Johnson stood outside the mansion in Coronado, his mind racing through the mounting questions. Who, as behind the bizarre scene, and more importantly, why? As he reviewed the case file late into the night, one detail kept haunting him. Jonah Shackney's brother, Adam, had been spotted on security footage, his face shrouded in suspicion as he entered the mansion after Rebecca's death was already confirmed. The Shackney family, with its tangled web of relationships and history, was becoming more difficult to navigate. Jonah, once a successful CEO, was now at the center of a storm that seemed to pull in everyone close to him. The timing of his brother Adam's arrival was a red flag. Adam had no apparent reason to be there, but his actions, his nervous glances, his quick movements made it impossible to ignore. Was he a witness, or was he involved in Rebecca's death? Detective Johnson's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone vibrating. It was an anonymous tip. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the words were clear. "You're looking at the wrong person." The voice continued with cryptic hints that pointed to Adam Shackney, claiming that the family had buried secrets far deeper than anyone realized. "The truth," the caller said, "is not as simple as you think." The phone line went dead. The next day, Detective Johnson decided to confront Adam Shackney. Adam's first response when asked about his presence at the mansion was defensive, but he quickly claimed he was there to check on Jonah. The timing was odd. Why hadn't he reached out to his brother instead of showing up unannounced at the scene of a tragedy? Adam's demeanor was cold, too composed for someone who had just learned of a close family member's death. He denied knowing anything about Rebecca's state of mind in the days leading up to her death, though he couldn't provide any definitive answers about what had transpired in the mansion. Johnson was growing more certain that Adam was hiding something. But there was more. When the police reviewed the medical examiner's report, it became apparent that Rebecca had been sedated before her death. The toxicology report showed traces of sedatives in her system, suggesting that she had been unconscious, or at least partially incapacitated, before being hanged. This added a new layer of complexity to the case. If this was indeed a suicide, how did Rebecca manage to sedate herself before taking her own life in such an elaborate manner? But the most disturbing clue was still to come. Detective Johnson's team had begun looking into Rebecca's past, and they uncovered something that made everything more chilling. Rebecca had been in a tumultuous relationship with Jonah Shackney. Their romance had been intense, but it was clear from her sister Mary's interviews that Rebecca had been deeply unhappy. She had even confided in friends that she was planning to leave Jonah. She had talked about moving out of the mansion and finding a place of her own. But the most unsettling detail was a conversation Rebecca had with a close friend just a day before her death. Rebecca had confided that she was afraid of Jonah's possessiveness and the control he seemed to have over her life. She also mentioned her fear of being trapped. These new revelations painted a portrait of a woman trapped in an abusive relationship, someone who saw no way out. Detective Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that there was a deeper connection between Rebecca's death and Jonah's family. What had really happened in the hours before her death? Why was Adam, the enigmatic brother, so involved in the aftermath? And why had Jonah seemed so detached in the wake of Rebecca's passing? The case took another dark turn when forensic experts began examining the ropes used to bind Rebecca's body, the knots with... As Detective Johnson flipped through the pages of Rebecca Zahau's hidden diary, his hands trembled. It was the breakthrough he hadn't expected. The diary, which had been buried in a drawer at the back of Rebecca's closet, contained fragments of her emotional turmoil and thoughts in the days leading up to her death. The final entry stood out, dated just hours before her death. Rebecca had written about feeling trapped and suffocated by Jonah's controlling nature. She spoke of her fear that if she tried to leave him, her life would be in danger. But it wasn't just Jonah she feared. In her final entry, she had written something else, something chilling. "Max's fall wasn't an accident. I know who did it. They're going to make sure I never speak out." The words were stark, and the implications were unbearable. If Rebecca had known who had harmed Jonah's son Max, then she had likely been silenced for knowing the truth. But who had done it, and why? Could it be that the death of Rebecca Zahau was, in fact, linked to the fall of Max Shackney? Detective Johnson's mind raced as he tried to piece together the fragments of the investigation. The diary was the missing link, the final piece of the puzzle. The more he read, the clearer the connection between Max's fall and Rebecca's death became. Jonah Shacknai's life was unraveling, and behind the closed doors of the mansion, a series of tragic events had led to a devastating conclusion. Max's fall had been no accident. It was a calculated move. But who had been behind it? The answer was, unexpectedly, closer than anyone had guessed. Rebecca's suspicions were right. Jonah Shacknai was hiding the truth. It wasn't just about his son's accident. It wasn't about a tragic fall. It was about a hidden relationship, one that Jonah had kept secret, even from his own family. Jonah had been having an affair with his ex-wife, Dina Shack, Kanai, and it was that affair that had driven a wedge between him and Rebecca. In the weeks leading up to Rebecca's death, she had found out about the affair. She had confronted Jonah, demanding answers. Jonah had tried to keep the affair secret, but Rebecca had threatened to expose it to the public. She had threatened to leave him, to end the relationship, and to reveal the truth about his infidelity. This would have destroyed Jonah's public image, his reputation, and his family. Detective Johnson had already suspected Jonah's involvement, but now the motive was clear. Jonah, desperate to keep his life from falling apart, had resorted to drastic measures. He had planned to silence Rebecca, to ensure she never revealed the truth about the affair. And when Max's fall occurred, it wasn't a mere accident. It was a prelude to what was to come. Max's injuries were severe, and the family had hoped the boy would never fully recover. But when he started to show signs of improvement, they couldn't risk him remembering anything that could unravel the whole story. Jonah Shacknai wasn't just trying to cover up Rebecca's knowledge of the affair. He was trying to cover up the entire chain of events that had been set into motion by his reckless decisions. And now he was about to face the consequences. But the final shock came when the police discovered something even more disturbing. A series of messages from Adam Shacknai, Jonah's brother. These messages, sent in the days before Rebecca's death, were cryptic but damning. Adam had known about the affair and was complicit in covering up the truth. He had even been in the mansion the day of Rebecca's death, shortly after it had been reported. His nervous behavior was not just the result of shock or grief. It was the guilt of knowing exactly what had happened. Detective Johnson knew that the truth was now undeniable. Jonah Shacknai, driven by desperation and a desire to protect his reputation, had orchestrated Rebecca's death. He had used his own brother to help cover it up, all while pretending to be the grieving boyfriend. But now, the truth was out, and justice would finally be served. The investigation concluded with Jonah Shacknai's arrest, and the media storm that followed was nothing short of explosive. The Zahau family, who had been fighting for justice, finally got their answers. But the truth didn't bring them peace. It brought them sorrow. They had lost a sister, a daughter, and a friend, all because of a family's secrets. Rebecca Zahau's death had been a tragic, unnecessary act, driven by lies, betrayal, and a man's desire to keep his life intact at any cost. The case would forever haunt those involved, a reminder of the dark power of secrets and the lengths to which people will go to protect themselves. But the final twist in the case left the investigators shaken to the core. Just months after Jonah's arrest, new evidence surfaced, evidence that suggested Rebecca's death wasn't the last secret the Shacknai family was hiding. They thought they had it all figured out. But as the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, a new question emerged. Who else was involved in the tragedy? And could there be more hidden secrets still waiting to be uncovered? And there you have it, the shocking conclusion to the death of Rebecca Zahau. Justice was finally served, but as we uncovered today, the truth goes far deeper than anyone ever expected. A web of lies, betrayal, and a tragic family secret that tore everything apart. But what do you think? Was it truly murder? Or was there something even darker at play? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your theories. If you think this story was intense, wait until you see what we've got next. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chilling true crime case we'll be diving into. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay safe and keep questioning the truth.